Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to meeting number 46 of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the members and our witness today. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please do remember to mute yourselves when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom is at the bottom of your screen, and you have a choice of either Floor, English, or French. Now, today, we are resuming our study of the security at the borders of Azerbaijan and Armenia. It is my great pleasure to welcome today from the Embassy of the Republic of Armenia, Madam Ambassador Harutyunyan, the Ambassador of the Republic of Armenia to Canada. I should also mention that we did extend an invitation to the Azerbaijani embassy here and to Baku as well, but unfortunately they were not available. Now, Madam Ambassador, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Yes, Mr. Bergeron.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to stand on principle too much, but you said he wasn't available. Is that the reason you were given to explain the absence of the chargé d'affaires from Azerbaijan, or were other reasons explained by the chargé d'affaires to say that he was not appearing before the committee?
Mr. Bergeron, is that a request was sent to the Azerbaijani Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but no instructions had been received here in Ottawa.
okay. Et vous avez reçu la...
Okay, and you received an answer from the Embassy of Azerbaijan verbally, by phone, or was a note sent to us?
Was a conversation I had. I had a conversation on Friday as well as yesterday as well, because I just wanted to receive an update as to whether any instructions had been received from Baku, but I was informed that nothing had been received as of yet.
Et conséquemment,
And therefore the chargé d'affaires did not feel authorized to appear before the committee?
He had sent them a request that someone be made available, but he had not received anything in return, any instructions in return.
est-ce que le chargé d'affaires...
Did the chargé d'affaires know that today's study did not deal specifically with the Lachin corridor, but the general situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan?
What I can tell you is that I specifically informed him of that, highlighted the reality that this is a study that we had decided upon prior to the motion that you had tabled, and that it would be focused on the situation at the Azerbaijani-Armenian borders.
Dernière question, Monsieur le...
One last question, Mr. Chairman. Would it be possible to find out the delay with which we invited the Azerbaijani embassy? Was it sent before Christmas or last week? What was the timeline?
Out, Mr. Bergeron, I couldn't hear.
Simplement, Monsieur...
I was simply asking you whether the invitation had been sent before Christmas or very recently.
Whether the invitation had been sent before?
At
Yes,
what time?
correct. No, I think it was in mid-January. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Just check with the clerk, and she rightly points out that, as you are well aware, we were not aware as to what our schedule would be going forward for this session. Previously, we were on Mondays. We're now on Tuesdays. So the clerk rightfully decided not to send out that invitation until mid-January, when it was confirmed what our schedule would be going forward.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Hoback.
In regards to that, I was wondering, could we ask, if it's appropriate, I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not, could we ask the ambassador if they choose not to attend, to give us the reasons why?
I'm not sure whether
In a
that
written-
would be
in a written letter?
appropriate. What
Mr.
I can
Oliphant,
tell
maybe
you-
you could provide guidance on this? Is that something appropriate or not?
I don't think we can compel
Can't compel
any
them, but-
witness, especially a foreign representative.
We can, but we shouldn't. Okay, I'd just seek your advice of the committee here, so.
I think it's their choice whether what they want to appear. I'd be advising them to appear to tell their story.
Yeah, I agree. So, okay.
Mr. Novak, obviously that does not preclude you from inquiring yourself, if you so wish. Yes, Ms. McPherson.
Could we ask if they'd be willing to submit a written explanation of their position?
I don't think that's appropriate. We don't generally do that. It has happened on numerous occasions in the past that we have extended an invitation, and unfortunately, for a wide variety of reasons, witnesses have not appeared before us. What we could do, perhaps, is to inquire whether they would like to make a written submission. Is that okay? Absolutely, Ms. McPherson. Yes, Ms. Bendayan.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if this is the moment to raise this. Perhaps I could request that we save 1 or 2 minutes at the end of this hour. But I would just like to flag that I understand that there is a deadline of February 8th in order to submit travel requests on behalf of committee. And I wonder if we might just keep a moment following the witness's appearance today in order to discuss what this committee might like to request.
Does that meet with everyone's agreement? Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Absolutely, Ms. Benaya. Okay. Madam Ambassador, our apologies for that. You do now have the floor. You have 5 minutes, and when there's only 30 seconds remaining, I will hold this up just to indicate to you that we'd be grateful if you could kindly try to wrap it up within 30 seconds. The same rule applies when it comes to questions that are put to you by members as well. Okay? Thank you for being here with us, Madam Ambassador. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to appear before this hearing. I wish I was here to brief you on the recent achievements in Armenia-Canada relations, discuss the extensive report of Special Envoy Dion on how Canada can better support the Armenian democracy, or to talk about the importance of the decision by the Canadian government to open an embassy in Armenia, which has become a reality among many other factors through years of tireless advocacy by a number of members of this esteemed committee. But unfortunately, the security crisis and challenges following the 2020 war by Azerbaijan against Artsakh and the following aggression and occupation by Azerbaijan of the sovereign territory of Armenia, and specifically the ongoing blockade of the Lachin corridor, forced me to concentrate on these issues which seriously undermine the efforts of Armenia to attain sustainable peace and stability in the South Caucasus. Immediately after signing the trilateral statement on November 9, 2020, Azerbaijan violated the commitment of a complete ceasefire and cessation of all military operations by launching an attack on Nagorno-Karabakh, which resulted in the capture of 2 more Armenian villages. In May and November 2021, as well as in September 2022, Azerbaijan launched a military incursion against Armenia, in which they seized 140 square kilometers of the sovereign territories of Armenia. Today, with almost 2 months of the illegal blockade of the Lachin corridor by self-proclaimed environmental activists, Azerbaijan has and continues to deepen the humanitarian crisis with a far-reaching aim to ethnically cleanse the Nagorno-Karabakh indigenous Armenian population. One can wonder why there is such a strong doubt about the so-called environmental activists' true intentions. It is a well-established fact that in matters of civil and political liberties, Azerbaijan holds one of the worst democratic rankings in the world, with a proven track record of oppression of protests and with dozens of political prisoners. The suggestion that there could be civilian activists in Azerbaijan who would be capable of launching a campaign of this size and scope without direct guidance and supervision of the state authorities is implausible. to say the least. Mr. Chair, following the signing of November 9, 2020 trilateral statement, Armenia spared no effort to achieve a normalization of relations with Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, Azerbaijan, instead of engaging in good faith negotiations, continues its aggressive posturing, anti-Armenian rhetoric, refuses to repatriate Armenians prisoners of war, intentionally destroying the Armenian cultural heritage, aiming to desecrate our history. Indeed, had Azerbaijan been genuinely interested in peace or in a comprehensive assessment of the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh or at the borders with Armenia, it would not be denying access to the international community to the region. The aggressive actions of Azerbaijan clearly establish that the absence of strong enforcement measures, including application of sanctions, the aggressor is and will continue to be encouraged to test the resilience and the determination of the international community. The only possible way of guaranteeing durable peace and stability in the South Caucasus is continued involvement of the international community. Under these circumstances, we highlight the importance of a strong international consensus on immediate and unconditional cessation of the blockade of the Lachin corridor and the withdrawal of Azerbaijani forces from the southeastern parts of Armenia. Mr. Chair, in conclusion, please allow me to state that Armenia highly appreciates the statement of Canada calling for full restoration of free movement through the Lachin corridor, as well as the statements made by a number of MPs of this honorable committee. In this context, we rely on your continued support in order to exercise the significant leverage the international community is capable of to pressure Azerbaijan to stop further deterioration of the dire situation currently unfolding in Artsakh in order to prevent a full-fledged humanitarian catastrophe. There should be no illusion that the continuous aggression, the threat of the use of force, accompanied by war crimes and other violations of international humanitarian law, can ever become the basis for a lasting and sustainable peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. We now open it up to questions by the members. For the first round, we will have 5 minutes each.
5, 6?
Yes.
6. It's 6.
No, but because of all the questioning and stuff, I just wanted to make sure we have 2 rounds. So, Mr. Jenis, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, for Your Excellency, for being here. I share your significant concern about ongoing Azeri state aggression in general and the Lachin corridor blockade in particular. Reviewing the testimony at previous hearings, I think it became clear that there is an ongoing blockade causing a humanitarian crisis, and although certain forms of assistance get through from time to time, it is nowhere near the scope and the scale that is required to maintain anything like normal life. It's also, I think, very clear from the evidence you've presented, but also that others have presented, that this is a choice by the Azeri state to cause this blockade to occur. Could you speak, please, specifically to the role of Canada in this? Obviously, as a Foreign Affairs Committee in Canada, our primary role is to advise the Government of Canada on steps that they should be taking in response to this. So what constructive actions would you like to see the Government of Canada take in order to address the wider situation, but in particular the immediate crisis of the corridor blockade?
Thank you very much for the question. And of course, as I mentioned in my testimony, we appreciate highly right after the blockade of the Lachin corridor, the statement made by the Canadian government calling Azerbaijan to unblock the Lachin corridor. That's an important step, but at the same time, we understand that maybe Canada doesn't have the same presence as its allies, United States and France. So what Canada can actually do, continue working closely with its allies to try to contribute to all the missions and steps that our allies are taking. More specifically, as you know, European Union decided to send a long-term civilian fact-finding mission at the borders with Armenia, which is a very important step, and Armenian government appreciated that move from the European Union, so Canada can be supportive to that mission. The other thing that I think, in case of authoritarian and corrupt regime that we see in Azerbaijan could be effective, it's the sanctions. So sanctions would be important to apply, and if this committee can come up with these suggestions, this is also something very reasonable and important. The other thing that I can suggest to this committee that in case if you consider it appropriate, the resolution on behalf of the House of Commons would be also very much welcomed, and it can pressure the Azerbaijan. As I mentioned during my testimony, the international pressure, the consensus of Western democracies on what's going on in Nagorno-Karabakh at the borders with Armenia is very important. The other important thing that I can mention here, don't be shy to call out Azerbaijan when it comes to human rights and, the corruption rate that they are having. Talk about the prisoners of, political prisoners that Azerbaijan is still have. Don't encourage your business to do, to make investments in the corrupt Azerbaijani state. This is also another way of pressuring Azerbaijan. So, and the most important thing that I think that I might share with you as a Foreign Affairs Committee, it's continue to work with your NATO ally Turkey, because Turkey's negative involvement in our region doesn't allow us to find long and lasting peace. So this is another thing that you can hold consultations and you can advise Global Affairs Canada to try to pressure Turkey to be engaged in the South Caucasus in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank you. And if I can just respond to a few of those points, this committee does have the ability to adopt resolutions which can then be referred to the House and concurred with by the House. So I hope we will have an opportunity to do that with respect to the Lachen corridor and other issues. I note with respect to your comments about sanctions and material complicity that this committee did work specifically on arms sales to Turkey and those weapons ending up in the hands of the Azeri state. And certainly we were very critical of the government for their failures around that. What kind of targeted measures can we undertake to ensure we're not in any way materially complicit with these threats to international peace and security or with the repression of the people of Azerbaijan by their government? What targeted recommendations would you say Canada could implement to ensure we're not complicit again in that kind of violence?
Very important not to hear both sides' statements anymore when it comes to Azerbaijan and Armenia, because the things, and the actions of Azerbaijan are talking by itself. So whenever you're talking to the Azerbaijani side, make sure that you name the aggressor. You know what's going on. These are the most important actions that Canada can do, and we would appreciate our continuous dialogue. Of course, I work closely with Global Affairs on a daily basis. I'm always in touch with you all here. So I think this is something very important. So human rights, democratic values, this is something that we share with Canada, and we have to be supported when it comes to the violations of this kind of values.
Okay. Thank you.
We now go to Ms. Bendayan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. A pleasure to see you again, Madam Ambassador. At the outset of your introductory remarks, you mentioned the importance of the embassy in Yerevan and the involvement of many members and the advocacy, of course, of the Armenian community here in Canada for that embassy. Can you give us a sense of, the impact that embassy will have and perhaps is already having in terms of the relationship between our two countries?
Thank you. Of course, as I mentioned, the report of Stefan Dion in my testimony, that became really a very important basis for the Canadian government to take the decision of opening an embassy in Armenia. We truly hope that the embassy will be opened very soon, hopefully in summer. I can give what, from the Armenian perspective, why it is very important, but at the same time, I'm here to stress the importance of the embassy from the Canadian perspective as well. And I would like to quote from the Stefan Dion's report and, some thoughts that he shared in his report why Canada decided to open an embassy in Armenia and not in Azerbaijan, because as you understand, I was following last week's hearings, and I hear some questions and witnesses pointing out at the necessity of having embassy in two countries. So though Stéphane Dion's report was concentrating mainly on supporting the Armenian democracy and finding the ways for Canada to support that democracy, but at the same time, he understood quite well that our security is directly connected with our democracy. So that's why he's calling the Armenian democracy as a fragile. So what he says, he does make one mentioning, in his report to Armenia-Azerbaijani conflict, saying, and I quote, "The risks of war decrease with the advance of democracy. The more two countries in conflict move towards democracy, the more they maximize their chances of finding common ground and a peaceful solution. To put it bluntly, when Azerbaijan makes decisive progress towards more democracy, Canada should consider ways to increase its presence there. By doing so, Canada would support the democratic transition in Azerbaijan as well as the prospects for peace in Armenia." End of quote. So again, this is a very important point raised in this report, because for us as a democratic country, it would have been much more easier to negotiate with the democratic Azerbaijan rather with this corrupt regime in Azerbaijan. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador, and certainly this report by our government's special envoy, the Honourable Stéphane Dion, is extremely important. And I know there were 11 recommendations in that report, and I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to touch on some of those in further questioning. With the time I have remaining, I would just like to highlight that just yesterday representations were made before the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, in a hearing that I understand began in 2020. Is there anything that you would like to share with this committee about the importance of that process and how you see progress moving forward?
As you rightly mentioned, yesterday the International Court of Justice held public hearings in the case concerning application of the International Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, Armenia vis-à-vis Azerbaijan. So, of course, it was mainly the issue of Lachin Corridor that was presented by Armenian side, and as one of the representatives of the Armenian side rightly mentioned, that the court is the last resort for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh to be freed from the ethnic cleansing, the threat of ethnic cleansing that they're, living every day on a daily basis. And what we see in Lachin Corridor, it's the proof of that.
And do you have further dates for hearings? And are you confident in the process that has been established at the ICJ?
We made a very strong case. This is what I can say. I was following, of course, the Azerbaijani side too, but I'm not talking here as an Armenian representative, but I thought our side was very well prepared and the arguments were very clearly made to the court, and I truly hope that court will take the decision, the right one, that will, express the interests of people of Nagorno-Karabakh. We are talking about people and human rights.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. And with the few seconds I have remaining, perhaps I could just invite you, and you certainly have been following the meetings of this committee on the topic quite closely, and have probably heard members request facts and information on the ground be brought to our committee. So I would certainly invite you to provide this committee with any information that you may have as events continue to unfold and things continue to develop in the region.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, the humanitarian situation is very dire on the ground in Nagorno-Karabakh. I have some friends that I'm in constant contact with them. I hear from them too. All the essential goods and products are missing. Kindergartens are closed. Schools are closed. They have the outreach of the electricity on a regular basis. The gas is cut off. But, I can go on and saying how dire the situation is. But, I think for this committee, a very important reference should be the statements made by foreign governments, namely US, France, including Canada, They call it a blockade. You know, the European Court of Human Rights calls it a blockade. The Committee of Ministers of Council of Europe, the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe, the European Parliament, Free Press, Amnesty International, Helsinki Commission, Human Rights Watch, International Crisis Group, Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention. What else do we need to know just to call it a blockade? I think if we trust our, allies and partners, that's a very important reference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now go to Mr. Bergeron. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Excellency, for being with us today. I couldn't overemphasize the question put to you by Ms. Bendayan and the answer you gave us, because to my great surprise, I noted last week that certain members of this committee seem to consider both parties equally credible. The testimony delivered to us, and therefore we indeed need neutral information, incontestable information, in order to get out of this situation, this Manichaean dynamic where one is right, the other one's wrong, and vice versa, with arguments coming from interested parties. So thank you very much for your answer to the excellent question put to you by Ms. Bendayan. As you know, in late August, the Prime Ministers of Armenia and the President of Azerbaijan met in Brussels with the mediation of Charles Michel of the European Union. A few days later, there was a great offensive by Azerbaijan against Armenia that only lasted 3 days, but that did allow Azerbaijan to occupy sovereign Armenian territory. And then there was another meeting in October between the Prime Minister of Armenia, the President of Azerbaijan, in the presence of French President Macron and Mr. Michel. There was a meeting in late October between the Prime Minister and the Premier with the President of Russia. During those meetings in October, did they ever discuss the Azeri offensive, and were any explanations given about the reason for that offensive, whereas peace talks had been undertaken in August?
Thank you for the question. Of course, the main reasoning that Azerbaijan is bringing when it comes to the violation of the territorial integrity of Armenia is that the border hasn't been, the border lines are not clear, and there is a clear need for delimitation and the border security. But, at the same time, Azerbaijan is engaging in the different talks. And what I can say, what's the reasoning of being engaged in the talks and then, violating the territorial integrity of Armenia, it's just for somehow face-saving reasons. But, as we see, Azerbaijan is not interested in peace at all. Because Armenia, since the very beginning, was engaged in 3 tracks negotiations with Azerbaijan. Those tracks are, the first one, we formed the commissions on both sides. So the first track is the opening of all transport communications in the region. That's one commission. The second one is the delimitation and the border security issues. And the third one is the agreement on normalization of relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, or a peace treaty, whatever you want to call it. So Armenia was engaged in these 3 tracks in good faith. But what we see from Azerbaijan, no interest to implement any kind of agreement reached during those discussions. So, the actions of Azerbaijan clearly talk about its true reasoning. They're not interested in peace. They're interested in peace on their own terms. But as you understand, peace can't be imposed. Peace should be negotiated. Peace means dignity, a well-being for all. Peace doesn't mean just an absence of war. So we are really interested in having long-term and just solution to the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and to Armenian-Azerbaijan relations. So for that, why? We request the international community to be there present. Don't allow us to be alone with the Azerbaijani side, because we need really an international engagement for finding a lasting peace and stability in the South Caucasus.
Une des témoins que nous avons entendus
One of the witnesses we heard, Ms. Bartanyan, made a statement that was quite shocking insofar as she announced that the Azerbaijani offensive was simply meant to position them strategically for some other armed conflict with Armenia, so that they can split the Armenian territory in two, and therefore obtaining by force what they clearly cannot obtain through negotiation, that is, the creation of a corridor to Nakhichevan. How do you react to that testimony by Ms. Bartanyan?
That Azerbaijan made in September 2022 are particularly striking because the way in which they widened the conflict footprint. Azerbaijan has taken control, as I mentioned, of 140 square kilometers of the Armenia itself. From their commanding positions, so they control very important mountains and geographically important mountains and heights. So the Azerbaijani soldiers have the capability to strike even further into the country and potentially, as you mentioned rightly, cutting the southern part of Armenia off from the rest of the country. So local officials and, of course, foreign experts say about 40% of homes and villages were destroyed. And the main reason is, of course, to have a linkage with Nakhichevan. Of course, I think we'll still have time to talk about the Nakhichevan and the issue of corridor that Azerbaijan is raising. But to your point, I wanted to say that you rightly mentioned they have now positions that will allow them in just in a matter of days to cut Armenia off from the rest of the country.
Thank you. We now go to Ms. McPherson.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador. This has been very interesting and important for us to hear. And of course, I'm very sorry for what is happening in your country. As a Canadian lawmaker, as a parliamentarian, I think what we're all looking for here is ways Canada can help and how we can get to a peaceful to peace in the region, because of course the loss of life, the impacts on Armenians and are very difficult. You spoke a little bit about how Azerbaijan is not letting the international community come in as observers. What is the potential for peace talks to happen? What would need to happen? What role can Canada play for us to move towards a more peaceful resolution of this conflict right now? And is that possible in the current context with Azerbaijan?
As a person that comes from Armenia, of course, I do want to believe that peace is possible. Peace is what it's needed for Armenia. But as I mentioned, peace means dignity. You can't have peace at all costs. Peace should be negotiated. And what Azerbaijan is trying to do, they're just presenting their points on the normalization of relations with Armenia, and they think that Armenia should accept them. Otherwise, it means that Armenia doesn't want a peace, but we want to find a negotiated solution. Safety and stability are the ultimate conditions in which reconciliation or any move forward can take place. Azerbaijan is not helping at all to create confidence-building measures. People don't believe in genuine interest of Azerbaijan to establish peace with Azerbaijan. So when we say the international presence is important, and the pressure on Azerbaijan is important, this is why it's so well stressed, and I will continue stressing on those points, because you have to pressure Azerbaijan with your allies, with your partners that are on the ground and working very closely with both Armenia and Azerbaijan to pressure Azerbaijan back to the negotiating table. we should find the roots and causes of this long-standing conflict. If the roots and causes of Nagorno-Karabakh are not addressed, it's not going to be a long-lasting peace. So, as I said, Canada doesn't have an embassy yet, but we truly hope we'll be on the ground. You'll help us, you'll work with like-minded countries on the ground and try to be, more constructive and complement the efforts that all the countries are doing and trying to bring peace to our region.
Thank you for that. And one last question for you. You speak about working with our allies, working with partners, like-minded countries. What are you hearing from, you've spoken a little bit about some of the multilateral institutions, but what are you hearing from other countries specifically on this? Could you give us a little bit of a sense on what some of the European countries are sharing with you at this time?
So we were able to build a very big consensus of international community, especially of the events that are unfolding at the Lachin corridor. And so there is this understanding that, Azerbaijan is really not trying to make any type of step towards peace. So the engagement is important. Now the countries that are working with both Armenia and Azerbaijan, they are clearly mentioning Azerbaijan as an aggressor. Azerbaijan who is violating, the rights of movement of people of Nagorno-Karabakh. So this is something very important. The fact-finding mission of the European Union is another proof that, European Union is trying to be there, to be present. And, I don't think how much they're going to change vis-a-vis, the Azerbaijani posture, but at the same time, they can lower the risk of the conflict being there on the ground. So Canada's present, of course, it's very much welcomed, and we hope that while being there, so as I said, you can work together and complement the efforts of your allies and partners.
Thank you very much, Ms. McPherson. We now move to the second round. For the second round, members will have 4 minutes. We first go to Mr. Epp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ambassador, for your excellent testimony. I noted twice in your testimony, early on you mentioned the term looking for a durable peace, and you concluded your remarks with a lasting and sustainable peace. And you've touched on the 4 areas already in your testimony today. So may I ask, from your perspective, what does peace look like? You've mentioned that Azerbaijan seems to be imposing only their own terms. You've talked about a negotiation process, but specifically around 4 areas, and I believe there's 4, and if there's more, please let me know. The border, recognition of the border. You said it isn't clear. There is an international border that's accepted. What does peace look like around that issue? Obviously, the Lachin corridor, the blockade. I'm assuming that the removal and the free movement, but I'll let you put that into words. Canada's foreign policy is built upon sovereignty, recognition of other sovereignty, self-determination, and peace, cessation of hostilities. So what does that look like for Nagorno-Karabakh from an Armenian perspective in the context of sovereignty and recognition, and also the corridor or lack thereof to Nakhchivan? Those 4 areas, we've touched on all 4 of them today, but from an Armenian perspective and a negotiating perspective, or from a desire for the durable peace, what does that look like?
Thank you. So coming back again to the issue of peace, of course, as I said, peace is very important for our region. But in order for us to be able to find that durable and stable peace, it should represent all the interests in the region. It can't be dictated upon Armenia what peace means, and we can't allow Azerbaijan to dictate us its own terms. That's why we're holding the negotiations. And as I mentioned just during the previous question, it's very important to address the roots and causes of the problem. You can't sign a peace without mentioning the Nagorno-Karabakh issue. The issue is there. Doesn't matter how much Azerbaijan wants it to disappear from the international arena. Right now, what we're discussing the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh and the rights and securities of the people living in Nagorno-Karabakh. If Azerbaijan is truly interested in peace, it wouldn't support this, it wouldn't have this state-sponsored Armenophobia that we hear on a state level from Azerbaijan. You know, it wouldn't torture and kill the prisoners of war, desecrate the bodies of the soldiers and civilians, destruct the Armenian cultural heritage. If this is the way they want to have peace with Armenia, so we have a problem here. International community has a decisive voice and place in the South Caucasus. This is a very important region. So Canada, again, can be very active when it comes to the resolution of the conflict with its statesmen, with its involvement with the parties, with involvement with the Turkey. Turkey is a very important player in our region, as I said, very negative player, unfortunately, despite the fact that we have another track of discussions with Turkey trying to see how we can normalize relations with Turkey. Unfortunately, I have to say that what we see, it just talks for the sake of talks. Nothing is moving, and so we see from Turkish side too, there is no interest to pressure Azerbaijan to be more constructive in the negotiating process.
Thank you. What I'm hearing you say, and I'm perhaps interpreting, is that you're looking for that lasting peace to come through a direct negotiation as opposed to in being posed upon. So correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Did you quickly want to wrap?
I was going to go to the internal process of accepting a durable peace within Armenia, if you can very quickly, what that process would look like.
Excuse me, I couldn't hear your answer.
What would a lasting peace look like through your democracy that Canada supports? What does peace look like as far as the acceptance from the Armenian legislature or the people? Is there a process internally that you would have to follow?
Of course, if we sign the agreement, there is a process for approval of that agreement. International agreements are being approved by the court. Constitutional court, but what peace means, it just means dignity and justice. If we can achieve through negotiations to that point, so this is peace that we are looking for.
Thank you. We now go to Madam Khalid.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Ambassador, for being here today. The insights that you're providing. One point that you made I really appreciated was the connection between security and democracy. In the Dion report that you've also referenced, Monsieur Dion talks about fragile democracies and how Canada can better support. Now, in terms of maintaining security, moving on to democracy, and in the context of the upcoming elections for Azerbaijan in 2025 and for Armenia in 2026, what role do you think Canada can play within kind of building that democratic institution and providing that support as we're thinking long-term in safety, security in the region?
Thank you. Of course, Canada has a very important role in supporting the Armenian democracy. Stéphane Dion, in his report, of course, he mentioned certain areas where Canada can share its expertise and can be really very important player for Armenia. The areas he's talking about, of course, fighting corruption, promoting human rights, supporting non-governmental organizations, supporting the reforms in the Armenian parliament. As you know, we're a very young parliamentary democracy. And we're very happy that we have a good, very good, constructive, working cooperation with the Parliamentary Center that is doing different projects for our parliament. So teaching us how to be a parliamentary democracy, this is very important for Armenia. I can't say, what Canada can do for Azerbaijan, because Azerbaijan, unfortunately, doesn't share none of these mentioned fields. For them, it's not a priority. As a country which doesn't, respect the rights of its own people, they have no freedom of press, no freedom of assembly. So that's why I was questioning the very essence of the environmental activists at the Lachin corridor. More democratic Azerbaijan, better for Armenia.
And just specifically with respect to Nagorno-Karabakh, you spoke a little bit about long-lasting peace and about reconciliation. What role does Armenia have to play? What role does Canada have to play with respect to building reconciliation, truth and reconciliation within that region specifically?
First of all, the parties involved in this conflict should have this political will to move forward towards that reconciliation. Unfortunately, that was my whole point during this presentation. We don't see any move from Azerbaijan that is ready to build a confidence-building measures. This is the ultimate condition for the peace and security. And we don't see it I don't know how can we move forward with those actions of Azerbaijan, but you can be sure that Armenia, as a democratic society, we understand the importance of reconciliation.
Do I have more time, Chair?
You have another 30 seconds.
Just very quickly then, I think I would be remiss not to talk about the gendered aspects of conflict. What do you have to say about the role of women in ensuring peace and security in the region?
With becoming a parliamentary democracy, women quite actively now involved in the Armenian politics. We secured the gender equality in our parliament. The same goes to Nagorno-Karabakh. So women have a decisive role to play. Canada has a women ambassador for women, has an ambassador for women and peace. I think this is the area where we can be in a very good contact with the Canadian partners, and we can, of course, host a visit of the ambassador, and she can share her experience and help us to be more involved in the conflict resolution problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now go to Mr. Bergeron for 2 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellency, I'd like to carry on the discussion we had about Ms. Bartanyan's testimony. I think the elephant in the room is the question of the corridor toward Nakhchivan. Some testimony last week led us to believe that since the peace negotiations don't seem to be resolved about the corridor to Nakhchivan, whereas Armenia made a commitment that it would examine the possibility of creating such a corridor. The blockade of the Lachin corridor seeks to exert pressure on Armenia to bring to a close the talks on this corridor to Nakhchivan. Another witness told us that we're comparing apples and oranges because it's not an enclave territory. It is in direct communication with Turkey, whereas Upper Karabakh is an enclave within Azerbaijan. How do you react to this kind of comment and testimony?
Thank you for the question. This corridor rhetoric that was brought by the Azerbaijani president, and he acknowledged that in his annual conference, saying that, of course, there is no mention in November 9, 2020 statement about the Nakhchivan, the corridor connecting Nakhchivan. But this is something that he's bringing for the discussions, and he's going to pressure Armenia to give him that extra territorial corridor that will connect western parts of Azerbaijan to Nakhchivan. Armenia made it very clear since right the beginning of this issue that started to be discussed that we rule out any extraterritorial corridor on the territory of the Republic of Armenia. This is a principled position of Armenia. Nothing can change this position, and I want to make sure that you understand that our position is fully in line with the relevant provisions of the November 9th statement. The decision on providing link between the western regions of Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan can be resolved very swiftly. That's why we're having a track where we're discussing unblocking of all territorial, regional transport routes. So we can do it very swiftly as soon as Azerbaijan admits that all communications should operate under the jurisdiction and legislation of the Republic of Armenia. So just one more point, since I have this time of talking about the Nakhichevan corridor, I want to make sure to show you the differences between the Lachin corridor and Nakhichevan, the connection with Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan. First of all, Nakhichevan and Nagorno-Karabakh, they have different needs, exist in very different realities, and they don't face the same threats. Nakhichevan, first of all, cannot be blocked by Armenia. Nakhichevan has neighbors, Iran and Turkey. Nakhichevan doesn't face the existential threat coming from Armenia on a daily basis, as Nagorno-Karabakh people are doing, because Nagorno-Karabakh is just surrounded by Azerbaijan. It's a matter of second to blockade Nagorno-Karabakh wherever Azerbaijan wants. And the third point that is also very important, that Nakhichevan has got a status within Azerbaijan. It is an autonomous republic by Treaty of Kars of 1921. But now what Azerbaijan is doing, they doesn't even want to accept the status that Nagorno-Karabakh had during the Soviet Union. It was Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Region. So these are the differences that I wanted to talk about between Nagorno-Karabakh case and, of course, Nakhichevan. Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to Ms. McPherson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
2 minutes.
Thank you again for your testimony, Your Excellency. I guess one of the ways that I'll finish off today, we're trying to find ways to protect civilians in the short term as we try to develop a longer-term peace in the region. I'm wondering what role the EU civilian monitoring could take, what role NGOs, human rights organizations, and other civil society groups could take in terms of having a ceasefire, having a peace right now that would protect civilians as we try to build on a greater, more concrete peace going forward?
You know, it's a very important question that you're raising, but it can be one-sided. We should have Azerbaijan cooperating in everything, but we don't see that. Of course, we can pursue the peace. Of course, we can, eliminate the hatred that exists and try to, to build that desired peace and confidence building towards Azerbaijani people. But we can't do it just on our own. We need a partner. We need a country that is really willing to have peace with its neighbors. So that's the problem. So EU has got a lot to do on the ground. Hopefully they'll do the same thing in Azerbaijan. Civil society has a lot of work to do. I'm grateful that Canada, through the Stéphane Dion's report, is going to support our civil society. This is a very important part of the democratic society. So, of course, there is a lot of work to be done. But again, when it comes to the lasting peace and, solution of the problem on the ground with Azerbaijan, I don't see any perspective with the current Azerbaijani government.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McPherson. So on that note, everyone's had an opportunity to ask questions. Allow me to thank you, Madam Ambassador, for having been here, for having shared your insights and your perspectives. We're very grateful that you agreed to appear before us. Let me also say that we would all like to see an immediate cessation of hostilities and for an enduring and just peace to prevail. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's before the subcommittee.
No, it is adjourned. It is adjourned. Mr. Chair.
So we're adjourning.
Mr. Chair, a point
Yes.
of order. Mr. Chair, you had agreed previously to my request that
Yes,
we
correct.
spend 1 minute.
You're absolutely
to
right.
discuss. Thank
Yes.
you.
So.
Inaudible.
C'est bien le 8 février.
February 8th, correct? So, if we wanted to travel as a committee, do we need anything else apart from the instructions of the members? the description, the country, the duration, the number of participants. That's sufficient. So, Mr. Chairman, I therefore propose that we table a request again for a trip to Ukraine. There are many parliamentarians across the country and European ones who have done this trip. Our Minister of National Defense was in Ukraine 2 weeks ago, and I believe that the situation, or I hope the situation, would allow us to travel there as members of the committee.
Yes, Mr. Bergeron.
Si vous saviez,
If you knew to what extent I'm comforted by this intervention by Ms. Bendayan, I have been calling for such a trip for months. I find it inconceivable that Canada, which claims to be one of the closest allies of Ukraine, if not the closest, is one of the only ally to not have sent a parliamentary delegation there. To me, that's an anomaly that we must correct as quickly as possible. And I find it unacceptable that going to Ukraine seems to be considered a privilege of the executive. There's no privilege of the executive on that front, Mr. Chairman. Therefore, I simply enthusiastically support the request made by Ms. Bendayan, and I hope that this time we will manage to find a way to allow us to go to Ukraine and to meet with our colleagues there and testify to our complete support for Ukraine by so doing at its darkest hour. Thank you, Mr. Bergeron.
Mr. Jennings, there's a list.
Well, on a point of order, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
point of order, yes.
Can we move this discussion in camera, just because one of the reasons why we're having this discussion is because of a trip previously agreed to is not able to go to Ukraine, and I think it would be useful just to bring this portion of the meeting into an in-camera discussion.
why?
Fair enough. First of all, it's a non-debatable motion, as I understand. We can talk about it after this meeting is over, but we have a subcommittee meeting slated at 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock. So would there be unanimous consent for adoption of that motion? No,
But just on the point of order, if we go into camera, we have to do a switch over, and that's going to eat the subcommittee that we've been.
It's a
waiting well
non-debatable
scheduled.
motion. The motion is on the floor.
Yes.
Sorry, there's no motion on the floor because Michael intervened on a point of order. So I'm speaking to the same point of order. No, you can't. You can't move a motion on a point of order, colleagues. So if there's unanimous consent to adjourn, then we can discuss the travel issue at the subcommittee along with the other issues. I'm just saying logistically that if we suspend, we go to in camera for the main committee, then we're gonna run out of time to have a discussion at the subcommittee. So.
Or we can have the discussion now, as was agreed at the beginning of this meeting.
Anyways.
I'm fine to go in camera for this discussion, but if there isn't consent to do that, I'm fine with that too, whatever.
Sorry, Chair, just a point of clarification. What's the deadline for submitting any travel requests, I believe? So that this would be kind of time being of the essence to have this conversation for sure.
I think there is unanimous consent to go in camera, Mr. Chair.
go. Yes.
Traduction.
So translation. Members could remember to speak into the mic, please. So, does everyone want to go in camera?
Oui.
Yes.
So, Mr. Chair,
One second, allow us.
I think
if
I have
we
the
could
floor.
just please
Okay,
figure this out first, whether there's translation or not. Is everything okay, Mr. Bergeron? Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. I understand you have a point of order.
No, sorry. I had the floor next. So like you were about to call on me, and then
Yes, correct. Please proceed.
okay. So in the interest of having this discussion at the subcommittee, as well as other issues we need to discuss, I would move that we adjourn the current meeting.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Did we vote on the request to move in camera?
A motion was moved on the point of order, which
Adjourning, you're saying? We have to vote on the adjournment?
yes.
Madame la greffière, est-ce qu'on a voté?
Madam Clerk, did we vote on the request to go? No? No, it was proposed on a point of order. You can't propose a motion on a point of order.
But she brought, the point of order was to introduce a motion, and then she introduced a motion, no?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe she did a point of order. I think she thought it was an agenda item because you had agreed to 2 minutes at the end of the meeting. So she didn't say point of order. I think Mr. Chong did because getting the floor.
Correct.
So I think there's a little
Absolutely.
difference
That's
there.
what I
So
understood
for
as
the
well.
motion of- I was
So,
referring to the motion of,
so could we,
yes, vote on going in camera.
okay, so we can vote on going in camera for further discussion on her motion.
Just can I understand what happened, Chair? Because my understanding was that I had the floor, and then I moved a motion, and that other members had points of order, but there was nobody else who had the floor.
My understanding is that actually the point of order made by Ms. Ben-Dayan was earlier. It was before the actual ambassador spoke, and she did not actually specifically say this was a point of order. She was just bringing her motion when she spoke.
Right, but even if there's a motion on the floor, a person can move a dilatory motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yes, correct.
So
There was one motion
But there
that
was one
not-
motion that was Mr. Chong's motion. He was moving to go in camera. So
I thought you said, I thought she was up on a point of order, Mr. Chair.
nope, she did not say that.
Okay, you had said I was next, but anyways, whatever, it's fine. Well,
vote on-
So we're putting this, can we do a roll call?
Sure.
Thanks. To go
So-
in camera.
The vote is
For
on
further
the motion to go in camera. Madame Ben-Dayan.
Oui.
Madame Khalid.
Yes.
Mr. Oliphant.
Yes.
Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi.
Yes.
Mr. App.
Yes.
Mr. Abultaif. No, sorry, Mr. Chong.
Yes.
Mr. Jenis.
yes.
Mr. Obach.
Yep.
Monsieur Bergeron.
Oui.
And Ms. McPherson.
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Mr. Chair, just on another point of order. In the future, when we go in camera, I just want to make a very quick point.
How much time do we need?
10 minutes, I'll send you the
10 minutes?
maximum 10 minutes.
So we're going to suspend for maybe 5 minutes, maximum 10.
you.